Hi friends, my husband and I just did an interview because he's a type 1 diabetic, and so it was my way to introduce him to all of you and let him tell a little bit of his story and struggles. So I hope that you enjoy this video. Ryan and I have been married for 26 years, and he is my better half. He has always stood behind me whenever I want to try some harebrained idea, and has always been encouraging of my continuing my education any way that I need to, and just kind of being there. And when I say I want to try this, he's right on board with trying it with me. So I'm very grateful for him, and that we took a little bit of time out of our hectic Saturday to put this together, and I hope you enjoy meeting my better half. Hello everyone. We are down at our family's campground, and the kids are off playing, so I thought it would be a wonderful time to introduce everyone to my lovely husband.
Hello.
Mr. LowCarb. If you follow my website, which is Sherry's Low Carb Kitchen, or since I changed my handle on YouTube to the Carnivore Mommy, I guess this would be the Carnivore Daddy, but that's kind of weird. So he goes by whatever, but Ryan is his given name. If you've seen some of my other videos, you know that he is a long-term type 1 diabetic, and so we just thought we would do kind of a mini interview and just talk with a real live type 1 diabetic about how his whole journey with keto and fasting and now carnivore is going, and a little bit about how when he was diagnosed and younger, the advice that he was given then, and how that really affected his diabetes from early on, and just the changes that he's noticed, because we all know that the mainstream medical advice for diabetes in general, but especially diabetics that have to inject insulin, is really not the best, and it actually makes worse issues. So, dear, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe some of those early years that you remember from when you were first diagnosed?
Sure. Well, I was diagnosed when I was about 13 years of age. Actually self-diagnosed. Happened to be learning about it in school, and ended up, as time went on and I got the symptoms, I was falling asleep in school, couldn't stay awake, was always dehydrated, thirsty, couldn't even drink water because it tasted like soap all the time. Eventually got to the doctor and got admitted to the hospital, and was there for a couple days, and was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at that time. So they started, going through all the education and all the things that I'm sure they still do nowadays, and how to inject insulin in yourself, and the barrage of all the introductory wisdom that they have for diabetics. So.
And that was 25 plus years ago. We've been married for 26 years, so I was probably closer to 32 years or so. So insulin has changed since then. When you were first diagnosed, you were on a pork insulin, if I remember it correctly.
The two, both the short-term and the long-term pork, and that was with the vials and the normal injection.
And then later on, they changed you to a combined insulin, if I remember correctly. It was a 60-40 or something like that.
There was a phase in that period in that time, yeah.
Because that was when we were married. So when you were on those other insulins and just kind of eating whatever and covering, early on, do you remember, first of all, how your sugars were, how you were feeling when you started getting complications?
That was a long time ago. The first couple of years, about a year and a half to 2 years, I could do no wrong when I was still early stages. So I really didn't have to watch what I ate much. I didn't have to worry about the the ratios and taking things on time, and because my body would just would plow through anything at that time. But after that ended, after the honeymoon period was done, it was definitely over and brought things back to reality. So
Do you go ahead.
So at that point, it was a challenge, and I think unfortunately my start there really set me up for a long time of bad practices, and especially with regard to my own health and watching how I conduct myself on a day-to-day basis. So,
do you remember what your highest A1C was?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
I do.
So you're better with that.
So his highest A1C at one point in time, and this was shortly before we started a more whole foods base, was up towards 12. That was the highest that I remember.
I guess.
And so that we've gone through our phases, and as a young wife trying to take care of my husband, and I want him to be around for as long as possible, and our young children, I would go to his doctor appointments, and I learned how to carb count and everything. Do you remember me measuring out spaghetti noodles and all of this? We did that for a long time, and his A1Cs were still awful. Blood sugar was still awful. There was at least one time where he would bottom out in the middle of the night, and I had to call the paramedics because he was seizing. That was not fun. And so that was when he was still on that combined insulin. Then we learned about different insulins, and so they got him on some different insulins, but the carbohydrates just weren't working. And probably back in 2016, 2017, I had learned about eating whole food and eating the paleo way, and we already knew that the gluten really kind of bothered his asthma, and I didn't even bother asking him. I was just like, we're eating paleo. And do you remember you came home and I was cooking steak, and I had cut up peppers and onions, and
yeah, I was all good with that.
You were like, where's my wife? So we did.
Yeah, she didn't like peppers. Never liked peppers.
No, but I cooked them because got rid of all the grains and all of that, and so we did that, and that helped somewhat. That between that and Neolife, but it was still a very high carb thing. And my husband, being the wonderful husband that he is always standing behind all my harebrained schemes. So when paleo still wasn't working, and then we kind of it was expensive, and we had foster kids, and we fell off of that. So then we ended up back.
Oh, and timing and energy into that was a big factor too, right?
It was not easy like how we eat now. And so we ended up back with breads and pastas, and as long as they were whole grain, and it was fine.
Yeah, we tried to eat the better of those things. But
and so then at the end of 2018, right before Thanksgiving, we went low carb, high fat. And we just dove in. We made it through that first Thanksgiving. Remember, we took all that stuff to Grandma's, and we had keto pumpkin pie and all the good stuff. But we made it through, and it took some time. And as we went through, we were at we'd stay between 50 to 100 grams of carbohydrates, and then towards 2019, we really got where our carbs were a little bit less, and we had your A1C down to 7 at one point. And
we even went a little lower than that, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And so going from almost 12 down to a little below 7 was amazing. So as we've been on this journey, how have you noticed that you're feeling? How have you noticed with your blood sugars, and if you're hungry all the time, or how tell as we've been from 2018 and
it's
going.
It's a long road, and it changes based on what we were doing, where we were at, and myself too, right? Because your body adjusts to everything as you go, eventually.
You keep wiggling the camera.
Don't bounce the camera.
Don't bounce. You're going to make our viewers seasick.
Yeah,
we don't want that.
Nope. So it's it's changed over time. I got to the point where when my blood sugars were so high, that feeling of rundown, exhaustion, fatigue, lack of mental clarity was always became normal. So it was hard to distinguish what I could have been like or what I should have been like outside of that. But as things stabilize and very, especially most recently, over the last year or so, the levels, when you're eating that better food, the low carb, high fat, it's instead of the roller coaster ride I used to be on all the time, because it would be up, then I'd take insulin, it'd be down, then I'd have to eat something, and I'm not good at correcting when I'm low because I always overcorrect, and a lot of times it happened in the middle of the night, so I just stuffed my face so I could get back to sleep and get up and go the next morning, and that would result in another day or more's worth of extreme highs. So evening out is huge. Avoiding those roller coasters and just staying level with it is a major factor in bringing me to be able to have more energy, do more things, drink less caffeine. I did a lot of things over the last 2 years too, just to keep myself going, especially the emerging markets of the zero sugar things and all the drinks. And I'm a heavy hydrator. I don't want to say drinker because then it's got the wrong connotation. Although I like to
hydrator, I like
every
that.
once in a while.
I like that.
But I because I was so run down and tired all the time, and even though I slept at night, I didn't really sleep at night. I got into energy drinks, and it was one first a day, and then it would creep up slowly, and then I'd dial it back and get back to one, and then it would be one or two a day, and just to keep myself going. So, and actually prior to that, I was big into diet soda for many years, high school all the way through. Maybe 10, 12 years ago, I was big on Diet Mountain Dew.
2014.
So I would drink up to a 12-pack of 20-ounce bottles a day. Oh, not a 12-pack, a 6-pack. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I would do that just to make it through a day. And then when I realized that I'd have to get off that and it was doing me bad, I would cut back and I'd make it for a while. I made it a couple of years without drinking soda, and then it would slowly creep back in. And once you kind of let it go, if you're not careful, it really takes a hold and it just becomes normal again. So, long story short, through all that journey, even the low carb stuff, the diet soda, even the zero carb energy drinks, the no sugar stuff, even I notice now too some stevia flavored things, still spike my blood sugar. So I'm very cautious and aware of that too. So I take the corrective measures if I do drink something like that, or I know I'm going to be drinking something like that. So I take the insulin up front and make sure I manage that versus waiting until a couple hours later and then I'm stuck real high for again another day or so. So.
And the end of 2020 and a lot of 2021, we both kind of fell off the wagon.
Yeah.
I think a little, and we were.
That was a stressful couple of years.
It was very stressful. I mean, as it was
in
I'm
society,
sure
yes.
For society in general, and then just dealing with other stuff besides what was going on in 2020. So we both kind of fell off the wagon. Do you realize that October 1st is our 1-year carnivore-ish anniversary?
No, it does not seem like it's been that long for one, but
because
it almost seems like we've been, on another phase, it almost seems like we've been doing it all the time because it's natural now.
It's so natural. And we had been keto, and like Dr. Berry says, there is a normal distribution curve of the proper human diet. So some people do very well on just low carb, high fat with up to, even like 100 total grams of carbs, so they can handle a little more fruit or some sweet potatoes or something like that. And then all the way to the other end, where someone like a diabetic that's insulin bound should really have as close to zero carbs as possible. So we did a couple of years where we were just a ketogenic, where we were like 20 to 30 grams total, but there was more vegetables and there was more prepping, and sometimes you just get tired of it. You know that it's healthier, you know that it's but it was just so much planning, and when you have kids and it just, I don't know, it is great.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot, and I still have keto recipes on my website, and I love them. But what's funny is the keto recipes that I made, looking at them now, I'm actually like, a lot of these are carnivore-ish, and I didn't even know it. And so it was the end of September that I said, Ryan, I'm going to start carnivore, where I'm just pretty much eating meat. And at that time, I didn't know the term ketovore, which is about 10 total grams a day if you wanted to add in a little bit of veg. And I said, do you want to do this with me? And he's so sweet. He's like, okay, I'll do it. Meat? Just meat? We'll do that. So it's so easy. And we had found Dr. Bernstein back in 2019, and I read the book and would just share the bits and pieces with Ryan because he didn't really have time to read.
Well, one of the ways you've always educated me, and whether it's intentional or not, is listening to your videos and the podcast wherever you're going. Or I know some of that was, some of it wasn't, but I always listened in the background regardless of what I was doing, and that helped.
Yep.
Let me see what you were into, because of course I was interested in what you were chasing. But it also lets it absorb into my brain and kind of help educate myself, not to the same level obviously, but still helps.
There was several times at our new house I'd be in the kitchen and I'd have either the phone going with like a YouTube video or I'd have it on the computer, and so I know, and then he'd be in the dining room or living room and he'd pipe up with a question. Because I would binge watch Dr. Berry's videos, and so one was with Kelly Hogan, and then another was with an eye doctor, and her name escapes me, so sorry, I don't do well with names, I do well with numbers. And because you had diabetic retinopathy,
yes,
and that you were diagnosed with that back in
Haven't been undiagnosed, but
right.
That's not been a problem in years.
In years, yep. So. And the eye doctor said your eyes are healthy, yes?
Currently?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Back then I did have, I had to have 3 laser treatments in each eye because of the hemorrhages and the bleeding that was coming in the eyes. I would, and when those happen and they float in your vision, it takes multiple days, sometimes a week, to actually clear up enough to have unobstructed vision in that eye. And I was lucky that it never happened in both eyes simultaneously to where I couldn't see, but it was quite often that one eye or another was not in real good shape, and it was very challenged to see. I could see through it, but read, distinguish details, those kind of things.
That was a very scary time.
Yeah.
For both of us. Yeah. Not knowing if he was going to lose his sight or be able to work, be able to support us.
But yes, going back to present, the last couple of years, my prescriptions have been holding steady, and I have not had every year get checked, and he says they're doing good.
So we're very thankful for that, and we know that a lot of that is due to the diet change, getting rid of those diet sodas, because aspartame is horrendous for vision and things like that, and then also due to some whole food supplements that we take, because he had started taking those before we knew about low carb high fat, because you were diagnosed in 2015 because a dear friend of ours had been moved overseas, and he contacted some doctors that he knew from when he was still here. So and he left in 2014, so it was either late 2014 or early 2015 that the hemorrhaging had started. So that was a few years before we had made the diet change, and so we were just doing supplementation, and that helped a lot. But really lowering the carbohydrates helped lower the inflammation, because you would have a lot of inflammation in your eyes, and that would change the pressures and contribute to the hemorrhaging.
I actually had to have one injection in one eye the night of one of the father-daughter dances, or day of one of the father-daughter dances. That was not a comfortable thing for me. I don't like things touching my eyes to begin with, and to have my eyes held open and a needle stuck in there was not pleasant. So
yeah. And they
I don't want to go back to that. But
they were basically shooting ibuprofen in there, right? Something to take
yes,
that
it was
inflammation.
a liquid to reduce the inflammation in the eye.
So yeah, that it's not a good thing, and because there was so many years of basically uncontrolled blood sugars, highs and lows, even though we know what we know now, it still is kind of like an uphill battle to try and correct all of those, because now you're just like wading through a sea of crap. Whereas if well, I'll let you say that, because I want you to give your opinions on that. But I forgot where I was going with this. Anyway, if we wouldn't have had to have dealt with all of this, it would be just so much easier. If you were to counsel yourself when you got diagnosed, knowing, or if say one of our kids, God forbid, ended up with diabetes, what would you say to them, knowing what you know now?
Unfortunately, I'm a stubborn man that learns from experience. So even telling myself, hey, watch your sugars, eat better, I think that would only go so far, because a lot of us, I think are, instinctively, intellectually, and you can do something that way, but a lot of us are driven by emotion and feeling, and hey, I feel fine when I eat this, this candy bar. It's not that bad. Or I have a small bag of chips, and so what if my blood sugar is 250 for a couple hours or a day or whatever? I can still make it through the day. So, but talking and really looking at what is the end result. Once you implement it, I think that's huge, because you can feel the differences. You can tell that there's a difference. Once you get through the sugar cravings and the bread cravings and the pasta cravings, and hey, I can have a piece of pizza and just scrape off the stuff off the crust, leave the crust behind, and not feel like I'm missing out on anything, because I'm getting the food I need. I feel fine. Is huge. And then having that trickle of education in the background, learning things as you go, and I think you hit it on the head. Is you spend a lot of time cramming and learning and absorbing, and everybody else has a lot of influences during the day, and you have to choose and pick which ones you can, and even just little bits here and there help, because that adds to your library of knowledge and helps steer the course of your next actions, right?
Yep. If you were to want to talk to diabetic educators, how do you think diabetic education should change because obviously the education that you received didn't work?
Well, in the back, what did we say that was? How many years ago that was?
Probably 32.
32 years ago. It was, hey, you got to count everything, and the counting system differed changed over the years, but you count everything. You try and not eat the higher sugar things, but you do count what you do eat. Try to eat healthier choices, what they consider healthier choices. And now to where a couple of years ago I got told, hey, if you feel like having a piece of cake, just dump more insulin in you. And that is definitely not the way to go, because the least amount of insulin that I can use, the flatter my blood sugars are, more stable things are, the better I feel.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And because of all those years that you were told, because when they switched you to, so this would have been back in 2002 or 2003, they switched you from that combined insulin to taking your basal, which at the time was Lantus, and then covering with a fast-acting insulin. That was when they really said, go ahead and eat whatever you want. So we're at 10 years. Well, you did that, and now not only do you have your diabetes, there's a parade going on, so you're going to hear honking. Not only do you have where you have to cover with insulin, but you deal with basically a type 2 diabetes too, of you have the insulin resistance. So the insulin that you're actively injecting, your body is resisting utilizing that correctly. So if we wouldn't have had all those years of eat the carbs and cover, maybe we wouldn't have that. Go
ahead and finish that. We
wouldn't have that disability. That insulin resistance happening
it's
too.
A disability too.
It is a disability. It is.
We'll pause this and we'll come right back after the.
Okay. Sorry for the interruption. The honking and the parade is done. So we were just talking about the insulin resistance, and one thing that it has taken me a little while. Remember, he said he was stubborn. So one thing that I have found that diabetic dietitians think protein doesn't need to be covered with insulin. The protein will raise your insulin, not as much as carbohydrates. And if you're eating a standard American diet, of course you're covering your protein with the insulin that you're covering for your carbs anyway. But when you're eating carnivore-ish or ketovore, as a type 1 diabetic or someone that does not make insulin, you have to cover for protein, or your blood sugars will continue going up. And you don't want to use the same insulin that you use for covering for carbohydrates. I lied. I thought it was done.
Oh well. Back out there.
You don't want to use that same insulin because the peaks of the rises don't match. And as someone that's not a diabetic, we take this for granted because we eat a steak, our pancreas does what it's supposed to. But for a type 1 diabetic, they do need to cover with insulin. And it took me a long time to finally help my dear husband start covering for the protein. And since you've started covering with the protein insulin, and so instead of measuring carbs like I used to do with the spaghetti noodles and all of that, now I measure his meat. And so I text him every morning because I make his lunch at night, and I text him every morning, your lunch weighs X amount of ounces, so that he knows, because there's a ratio. And you have to try and figure out that ratio. How do you feel like now that you're covering and your sugars are staying more stable with the protein, how are you feeling?
The blood sugars are definitely much more level that way. So I think it was a good inclusion into my regimen to put the R in there and utilize that. I actually find that more effective most times than all the other fast-acting insulins I've taken before. So I still have that
right.
To utilize if I have a spike or something else,
mm-hmm.
To help bring it back down. But it does not seem to be nearly as effective for me in my body than the R is.
Yeah. And so in Dr. Bernstein's book, The Diabetes Solution, so if you don't know about Dr. Bernstein and you are a type 1 diabetic watching this, please get his book. He also has a YouTube channel, which I will link in the description, as well as a link to get his book. And it comes in Audible, and you can get it in hardcover. I get nothing for sharing this, but Dr. Bernstein has not only changed our lives and Ryan's health, but he is a type 1 diabetic himself, and because there was no help for him, he's 80 some years old, and he was diagnosed when he was real young, like 8 or 9, something like that. They didn't even have meters at the time. And so his message and his teaching is just so powerful, and it's one that every endocrinologist really should learn from him. But anyway, if you are a type 1 diabetic and you have not seen his any of his work, it is a must. Even if you just implement half of the things, it's just a huge must. And his one thing is the R insulin. And so instead of like covering for carbs, which cover for fast, it releases very gently over a 2 to 6 hour period, and that matches the slow digestion of the protein and fat. And so I, stubborn man, but I had been, just every now and then, hey, your sugars would be better if we would just do R. And it's been 2 or 3 months now since you started that, right? I think the beginning of the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had finally said, "Give me the R. I'm going to give it a try." And I hear his CGM go off so much less for the highs. And actually now it goes more towards the lows. So we're thinking that he's becoming more insulin sensitive. And now we just have to work on honing in his changes. But, as a non-diabetic, we take all these things for granted, and we don't have to figure this stuff out. And when you have to inject insulin and you are constantly on that roller coaster, like he was saying, he'd go low and then just shove food in his face, and 3 or 4 hours later it comes back to bite him because now he's in super high. And all of that really does damage on the organs and the eyes and the kidneys, and some of these things you really want to keep with you for a while. So we're just we're just happy that we're making these changes and that the education is there. And so we just wanted to share our story and just the journey and some of the struggles, because it's not easy, is it?
No, not at all.
But
it does get easier once you get to the place where you should be.
Yeah.
Right now, it's pretty much, I would say it's almost completely second nature and natural for me to, eat the foods we're eating and not miss out on other things that we're not, because I have no cravings for that other stuff. And when we're sitting down to eat, and figure out what it is that I'm going to be eating and taking insulin for.
Yeah. Yep. So thank you so much for watching, and I'm so glad that I finally got to introduce my better half here.
Nice meeting you all.
I'll con him into some more videos at some point in time. Maybe I'll con him into a cooking video or something. I don't know. We'll see. But if you are not subscribed to my channel, please be sure to do that. If this was helpful in any way, please be sure to hit the thumbs up. If you know any type 1 diabetics that this might help, maybe they're on the fence about making a diet change. Maybe they have a young child that's recently diagnosed and they are saying, we're good with just covering with insulin and they can eat whatever because they're a child. Let me ask you that before we end. Often I hear from parents of a diabetic, and I know you're an adult, but being a child is hard enough. I'm going to let them eat what they want and just cover with insulin. As now an adult diabetic and having, the complications and things, what do you think about a parent that has that mentality versus like teaching them, like with our little one, she can't have gluten. It makes her extremely sick. So in my mind, I'm sitting here thinking, well, it's hard to be a kid. I'll just let her eat gluten and feel like crap all the time. Well, I'm not going to not going to do that because I don't want her to end up with stomach cancer or something,
And
down the road.
She felt like so much crap. She willingly did that herself because she was
Right.
so miserable. And now it doesn't bother her as much as it used to.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about parents of children with that mentality and versus like, well, let's just not necessarily take all the good things away, but maybe finding good alternatives, or just letting them eat what they want and cover with insulin and deal with the fallout as an adult. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's two. One, it's very similar to what happened to me my first couple of years because I didn't have to worry about anything. I didn't have to watch what I was eating. And, things were so good, I set up myself for a bad pattern. And a lot of years of difficulty trying to break that. I mean, almost probably 30 years of trying to break those habits. And 30 years of my health degrading, and trying to keep it where it should be, but that was a struggle. And even if it's working now, at some point, based on my experience, I think it's probably not going to work. And they're going to have a heck of a time, a very difficult time, trying to change that lifestyle more than if they were raised that way.
Right. That's a really good point. So with that, I think that is the perfect end to Mr. Carnivore's introduction. Again, please do subscribe, please share, and please hit that thumbs up. YouTube algorithm is funky, so if you only watch like a couple of minutes, it keeps track of the watch times. So even if you just leave the video play, that just helps the algorithm and will help this get out. I will put links to the things that we discussed, especially Dr. Bernstein. If you're interested in learning about the R insulin for the protein, and you're in the United States, Walmart, you can actually get, not the R protein, the R insulin, I'm sorry. Walmart, you can actually buy the R insulin without a prescription. Some only have the vials. Most carry the pens. But if your doctor or your insurance company won't cover the R, it's relatively inexpensive. Depending on the state you're in, it's going to be under $50 for a 4-pack, and that will last you a while because you don't need nearly as much insulin to cover protein. But again, Dr. Bernstein he covers that in his book and in his YouTube videos. So I'll link all of that in the description, as well as to my website if you are looking for some recipes. I try to get something on there. I'm pretty busy, but I try to get something on there a few times a month. And I'm going to sign off. We will talk again soon.